Yeah, because Wagner just tweeted it and we have retweeted it, so should show something other than like screen. Oh, cool. It's loading.
Okay, so we're actually on that. We're now live somewhere. No, we're coming through on the Facebook stream. Oops. Hi, folks. Just getting set up. Will be just a minute.
So there's been a momentary delay, but let me just go right into the introduction. So my name is Wagner James Au. I've been doing virtual world reporting in and out of virtual worlds for, almost 15 years. Wrote the book Making of Second Life, which was about my time at Linden Lab. And actually, Jaron was a early advisor for Linden Lab. He close acquaintance with Philip Rosedale, and so there's been a momentary delay, but let me just go right into the introduction. So my name is Wagner James Au. I've been doing virtual world reporting in and out of virtual worlds for, almost 15 years. Wrote the book Making of Second Life, which was about my time at Linden Lab, and actually Jaron was a Linden Lab. He close acquaintance with Philip Rosedale, and so there's been a momentary delay, but let me just go right into the introduction. So my name is Wagner James Au. I've been doing virtual world reporting worlds for, almost 15 years. Oh, sorry, just a loop there. So yeah, Jaron was an advisor to the Linden Lab, which actually he covers in the book, his new book, which I have right here in my hand, Dawn of the New Everything. And as we'll discuss, it's as much about his time in real life as it was is life in VR. But yeah, Adam and I are very honored to interview Jaron, someone who's been an incredible influence on both of us. In fact, it's quite possible without Jaron's influence on the technology, we may not be standing here as avatars today, joining an audience of many dozens here from all over the world. And this is something that Jaron, I think, foresaw decades ago. So let me see. We will start. He will pop up momentarily. Oh, he's in the other room. We will. So yeah, maybe chat among yourselves for a few minutes while we get set up.
We do apologise for this delay. It's, as I said, it's been an interesting morning so far. But we're looking forward to speaking with Jaron. We just spoke with him a moment ago, so we are all good to go. We're just waylaid by Bay Area traffic, I think is the...
That was the well, and I experienced this with Second Life events. There's always going to be many real-world based delays before all of the virtual stuff actually happens and comes into sync. So that is basically where we're at. But here I'm talking with Jaron's team right now. Just a sec.
So while Wagner gets Jaron back, I will give you warm welcome to Sinespace. If this is your first visit, then please enjoy yourselves. We can talk a little bit about the platform. This is a social virtual world space, and we've got VR support, and that's something we've been working on quite a bit over the last few months, sort of building up a good, robust VR experience. We've actually got a lot of interesting features which are narrowly missed being available today. We've got a newer viewer update coming along tomorrow that adds a whole bunch of interesting things relating to the VR experience. What we're trying to do is build more in the way of multi-user interactive experiences with VR, which is a rather sort of interesting topic on its own. And I'm one of the developers here. I'm the main developer, in fact, who has been architecting the platform for a while. We can talk your ears off about the actual interesting side topics involved in actually building multi-user VR, because one of the biggest things that we have with internet-based VR experiences is latency. And it's actually a very interesting topic that...
all I'm seeing is the Steam Home, right?
I think we've just got... James, you're on the call, so...
Yeah.
Do we have... Yes.
Hi.
This is live. Welcome, James. James is from Jaron's team and just helping us get up.
I think that's Jaron himself right now.
Yeah, this is Jaron. I'm not actually... Am I on the headset mic? I'm not even sure.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
cool.
You're coming in great.
All right, so I'm in the Steam VR home.
Yes.
which is, am I instead to be in a world that you are presenting, or?
Yes. If you open the application, it should be all set up and good to go.
And we could do that, or we could just start the conversation on Skype right now, and perhaps in the background, James on your team could set up the application. So yeah, if you're ready, I could just start talking about the book. Jared?
Whoop. I think we might have just lost him again, unfortunately. Hopefully they'll be back in just a second. Oh, sorry. While we wait for that to back, it'll just be one moment, I'm guessing. We hopefully won't be too much longer before we have Jaron. That was, in fact, Jaron, though, so we're getting a bit closer to everything running smoothly.
Yes, yeah, it's. I think we had trouble with Skype. So maybe Adam, while we wait, you could talk a little bit about the next iteration of the VR client.
Yeah, so I was leading towards the long and complicated, short of being able to, the difficulty of simple tasks in multi-user VR, like being able to pick up a basketball and toss it to someone else. And you think that sort of thing is relatively simple. You're just sort of applying a bit of physics here and there. It's all solved problems. Hang on, we've got Jaron back.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back.
Hi there, Jaron. Can you hear us okay? Sorry?
Yeah, I'm just on a mobile phone now.
Okay.
I'm just on a mobile phone. The system crashed for some reason. So
that's totally fine. Let's just jump right in. So yeah, welcome, Jaron. You have a large audience here. If you go to New World Notes online, if you happen to be online, we have a live video stream. You can even watch the audience there. But actually, the first thing to talk about is when we created your avatar, you wanted an octopus avatar, which is really interesting. Maybe you could talk about your affinity with octopuses.
Yeah. So, I've been fascinated by cephalopods for a long time, and obviously I'm not the only one, but this started for me decades ago. They are the most alien intelligences on our planet. They're another species that made a trade-off similar to what we did, which is they got soft bodies in exchange for big brains. Like evolution put energy into this particular strategy. But they are the only species that's done that is not a vertebrate.
Mm-hmm.
There are other intelligent vertebrates around. We have, crows and whales and whatnot. But here we have a mollusk that went down the same path. And so it's the closest thing we have to running evolution twice and to seeing what other forms intelligence might take. And in particular, from a VR perspective, the cephalopods are particularly fascinating because there are a few kinds that are sort of like avatars themselves. They can morph their bodies into all kinds of shapes, including mimicking things they see, sometimes for camouflage and sometimes for all kinds of crazy reasons, for mating strategies or apparently just for random art or fun. They can project images right onto their skin, and they actually have a direct connection between a visual processing lobe in their brain, and their brains are organized very differently than ours, so that you can kind of watch these patterns, which are their visual thoughts. And this to me is fascinating because, let's say with people, we can hear sounds, but we can also make a fair variety of sounds with our mouths. We can mimic all kinds of sounds. We can make animal sounds and pretend to be a trombone or whatever if we practice.
Right.
But with images, we have a very limited ability. We can, like when you play charades, you can kind of make your body suggest things, but you can't just directly create a stream of images. But they can. They have this ability to both see and then also create images directly from their brains of what might be seen. And to me, that's incredibly provocative, because that's exactly what I want the experience to be like in the future, where you could have some form of communication that improvised anything. And I'm especially interested in I can into weird avatars as a form of communication. That's really my thing, is weird avatars. That's my favorite thing to do, and they can just do it naturally. But there's this thing about. Am I going on too long? Can you handle this?
Oh, this is great.
Give me feedback if you feel like this answer is going on. Okay, so the thing is, there's this tragedy about the way cephalopods evolved, which is they don't have childhoods. They're born from eggs, and the parents aren't around. So even though they're really smart and they can actually learn a remarkable number of things, and they have, they're just extraordinary neurology, but they start over with each lifetime. They can't pass on culture through generations. So each one of them is like this isolated intelligence, with no context.
Right.
They have no culture. And so I had a formula for a long time, which was human plus VR equals cephalopod plus childhood. In other words, wow. The ultimate goal of VR might be thought of as being turning people into cephalopods with childhood.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So
that's really cool.
And, I can go on and on about this stuff.
Oh, yeah. That's good. Well, talking about childhood, that kind of leads us right to the book, because Donna Knew Everything. I really like the structure. You kind of talk about your real life as much as VR. You talk about your childhood in New Mexico and tragically losing your mother and life in New York. What inspired you to weave real life and virtual life together in the book?
Oh, gosh. Well, there are a lot of different reasons for that. Part of it is I get a little bothered by this kind of disembodied, nerdy, almost like inhuman voice that we use in technology a lot, as if we're not all mortal and vulnerable and we didn't have our own childhoods. I try to, I like to think about technology as a person, with all that means, that I was a child and such things. I just think if we don't do that, we're not being real. So that's part of it. Also, just the circumstances. While it happened that I wrote it shortly after my father passed away, and then during the period I was writing it, my wife was battling cancer, which was successful. But I was just very much thinking about the cycle of life and how fragile we are and all. And I really wanted to speak from that perspective instead of from the sort of invulnerable perspective that people often bring to technology writing.
Right. That's really well said. It reminded me of that really great image as a child when you see for the first time Hermanus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights, which actually you were displaying. What maybe you could talk about that and its relationship to VR as you saw it.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of interested in medieval times. There were a lot of, and actually in all periods in history and all over, there were a lot of things that were sort of like people groping their way towards virtual reality. And if you look at this remarkable artwork from the surreal artwork of those eras, it's just it's really just astonishing, and it's astonishing that it can still communicate to us over so many centuries, And when I was a kid, I found some kind of solace in it. I'm seeing actually the world now. We got the computer back up running, so I see the Garden of Earthly Delights is up. Yeah. So my mom died when I was little, and the there was something about I just felt so isolated and so lonely and so kind of like so distant from other people that seeing this art, it just gave me this feeling that, wow, no matter how weird we get, there's like some way you can still connect with other people. There's like there has to be some connection between us for this weird stuff to even communicate at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It's a little hard to describe, but it's like it just felt like other people were so distant, and here you had this thing that was very distant, very strange from another time and another way of thinking, and yet it still communicated. And it's just something profound about that. It's sort of like if somebody from medieval times, from this entirely different world, can reach me and touch me, then maybe other people in this world are reachable and touchable too. It's like there's something about that, that
mm-hmm.
definitely was a big motivator for me in starting to think about things like virtual reality. It was it set the stage for me.
That's great. And one thing I was surprised that you mentioned you have in the book you mentioned you have face blindness. In other words, the inability to recognize specific faces, and it occurred to me that might have a relationship to how you perceive VR and your relationship to avatars. Maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what it correlates to,
right.
And I don't know. I don't think anybody really fully knows if prosopagnosia, which is face blindness, is fully genetic or if it can be influenced by childhood experiences. I think it might have something to do with the trauma of losing my mother. I'm not sure though. I used to hang out with Oliver Sacks when he was alive, and he had prosopagnosia as well.
Right.
And so we spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I will say, I mean, like one of the things about virtual reality is that you can, like the avatar you've made for me here with the dreadlocked octopus, really doesn't look like any other avatar, and so even somebody with prosopagnosia should be able to recognize it, right? And so there's something. I guess the way that virtual reality can take things to extremes and make them sort of weird actually also is a way of cutting through the kind of cognitive fuzziness that inevitably exists because of how individual variations between people. So there's something about it that can be kind of comforting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe a less comforting question. You're one of the few VR evangelists to discuss the potential dark side of VR. You even say in the book, one definition for VR is the perfect tool for the perfectly evil Skinner box. So how do you feel about that statement now? Especially we're finding out the biggest VR company is Facebook, and we're finding out all kinds of things about them. And maybe you could talk about that.
Well, yeah. You're right. It's not a comfortable question, and it is a really unpleasant question, but it's one that all of us have to think about. So when I was a kid, I was so excited about the potential for virtual reality. I used to just, when I was like in my teens, I would stop people in the street and show them articles from Ivan Sutherland, who made the first VR headset, just randomly, even though that was absurd. But there wasn't an internet yet, so you couldn't like find people to talk to who were already interested in something. You just stopped strangers. It's just like a bizarre behavior, but that's what I could do. And so I was just so into this idea that there would be this medium that would defeat the distances between people's brains. It was almost like I felt like other people's heads were like distant stars you could never reach, and so VR would be like the relativistic, or like it would be like a warp drive for media. It would reach across this chasm.
Right.
And then when I was like 15, my dad gave me a book by Norbert Wiener called The Human Use of Human Beings, which, among other things, talks about the potential for a computer to become an automated behaviorist that could be operating a Skinner box and modify the behavior of some animal or person in a self-optimizing way. And what a terrifying idea that is. Oh, my daughter just came in. Hey, Lilibel.
Hey there.
Hi. So anyway, so I thought about this, and Skinner. Norbert Wiener even has this thought experiment about, like, what if everybody on Earth had some wireless device that was measuring their behavior and providing them with some kind of a media experience stream and was connected wirelessly to a central giant computer, and everybody, the whole population, was put under some kind of behaviorist mind control scheme. And he said, this is only a thought experiment. As a great scientist, I can assure you this could never be done. But just as a thought experiment, if it would done, that would surely end civilization and possibly cause extinction of the species, because then everybody would become crazy, And of course, that's exactly what we've done. So if you think about what a VR system is, it's measuring a lot about a person. You have to measure a whole lot to make a good VR experience, including you have to obviously accurate motion tracking, or else the thing won't work. And in an ideal system, probably facial expression and all kinds of things. And so you have this accurate measuring device, and then you're also providing feedback, which is a whole experience of reality. So you have the makings of the most complete Skinner box, even more so than any physical Skinner box, because you're measuring more and you're providing feedback on more levels. So, yeah, a VR system that's good for anything, including for overcoming this kind of distance between people and for making great art or great education or great training or any of the things we're all interested in. In addition to that, it also could become the very creepiest behavior modification device. It's so it could be a device of nightmares. And back in the 80s, when I had the first VR startup, I was profoundly concerned with this question of this knife edge between technology going good or going bad. Like, to what degree is it about dreams and connection, and to what degree is it about manipulation and trickery? Given that the technology is good at both of those things, what makes it go one way or the other? And back then, I had a belief about it, which is that if you just said the right things, if you got people excited about it on the right terms, then you could set it on a course where the good stuff would happen instead of the bad stuff. But I came to decide that wasn't true. I tell a story in the book about arguing, unfortunately, with William Gibson way early when he was starting to write cyberpunk style stuff, where I would say, Bill, you can't make it seem so dark and creepy, because then people will think it's dark and creepy, and then it will be dark and creepy. Like, you have to... And he would say in his Tennessee accent, and I can't do accents, but he would say, Jaron, you don't write the book writes you. Like, I can't, what you're saying sounds great, but I can't do anything about it. And of course he was absolutely right about that, and I started to think about this issue of what makes things go good or go bad. And I decided that ultimately the most powerful force is economics, and like what incentives people have in a system immediately that influence their actions. I don't think that creating a system with good incentives is all you need to do to make a pleasant world and to make people happy. I think there's a lot of different factors on other levels, but having a bad economic system can definitely ruin a world. And I think we've seen that again and again. Oh, I don't know, communist regimes come to mind, but so do many others. And so I started to think about, like, what are the economic structures that might lead to a good world? And I don't want to spend the whole time on this, because this is a different topic. That's my other books. But basically, if you have a society where the only way to finance two people connecting on any level is a third person who wants to manipulate them with some sneaky scheme, obviously the society is going to go insane. And so obviously every penny Facebook makes is from doing exactly that thing I just described. And yeah, they bought Facebook. I mean, they bought Oculus, and I do find that disturbing. I mean, I know a lot of people at Oculus who are great. I know a lot of people at Facebook who are great, but there's something about this being in the center of this business plan based on manipulation does bring out the worst in people. And I just have to wonder, like, well, I won't even go into it. I was about to go riff on whatever the hell happened to Palmer Luckey, but you know what? Let's not even go there. I think what has to happen, even though it might seem like a long shot, is Facebook has to change its business model to not be based on manipulating everything on behalf of third parties who aren't there. They have to get out of the middle of everything and have some other business plan, of which there are many to choose from. And they have to do it before VR becomes very commonplace, or else we'll all die from insanity. I mean, I believe that, it absolutely must be a transformation that takes place.
Yeah, agreed. This kind of dovetails to my next question, because we just had Ready Player One come out, Steven Spielberg's adaptation of the book, and actually that's you showing VR to Spielberg is in the book. I was wondering if you could talk about that a bit.
Well, I still haven't seen Ready Player One. I've been meaning to, but I have this kind of crazy busy life, and I just haven't had a chance to. I did, it's funny, one of the people from the old days, in whenever that was, when I used to hang out with Spielberg and we took VR to Hollywood and all this, there's a guy named Walter Parks who ended up producing Minority Report. And, and he's put together a location-based VR thing that I think is called something like Dreamscape. I might have that wrong, but it's like a play on DreamWorks. And he, it's good. It's a little like The Void, but I think maybe a bit more mainstream, and I liked it. So they're actually that crew in LA, that circle of people around Spielberg is getting into making real VR now, and I'm kind of happy for them. I thought they did a really good job. It looked really good to me. But anyway, so in the old days, I there was this like oh god, this is like such a long story. So Spielberg wanted me to bring a VR demo to the Hollywood places, and we were going to try to make VR like theme park rides. And this was in the 80s, and it was just a crazy dream and way premature. They're just in those days, it was a couple $1 million per seat at a minimum to do a decent VR experience, and sometimes even more to do a better one. And a headset that was the equivalent of, I don't know, like an Oculus Rift or something now would have been a $50,000 piece, and we were making those. We actually had a little factory to make them in Redwood City, California, if you can believe it, but they were really rarefied. And so he was saying you have to bring in these the computers. It wasn't just like a little card and a PC like it is now. They would be like these giant refrigerator units. You could fill a whole room with incredibly noisy giant, things, and they would be not as powerful as the worst. I mean, I don't know, the lowest quality 3D you could get on a phone now if you tried. So it was just super expensive. And he was saying, bring it down. Like, there's no way to bring it down. It's just not going to happen. Like, it's just too expensive. And he said, but we're Hollywood. You have to come to us. And I said, we're Silicon Valley. You'll be coming to us, And he was like, I don't think so. And he said, oh, yeah. And, of course, no, that did turn out to be true. But what they did is they came up with a bunch of money to pay to create this thing called Reality on Wheels, which was a truck with VR demos in it, like a semi. And so we drove it down to LA and parked it in different studios so people could get a feeling for this new thing. And it was an interesting experience. I think one story in the book is there was this, like, the old classic studio head was Lou Wasserman was still running Universal then. And he said to me, hey, are people going to get sick in this thing? And I said, oh, no, Mr. Wasserman, no. We understand motion sickness now, and it's not going to happen. and he said, no, you don't get it, kid. He goes to Spielberg and says, hey, why are you sending me this kid who doesn't know the first thing about entertainment? And I'm like, what? What did I say wrong? And he says, well, no, you don't understand. I want headlines about how my janitors are quitting because they're sick of cleaning up the vomit. That's how you sell tickets. You don't know anything about publicity. You know nothing. And I'm like, oh, God, this is really... So
Well,
I was like, no, if you want people throwing up, we can do it. We know how to do that.
I mean, they still sell Nasha. They have not Nasha Chews at VR demos still to this day. So maybe they should be promoting that more.
I don't know. You'd have to ask the ghost of Lou Wasserman. You know, I personally can do without simulator sickness. My feeling is the less of it, the better. But call me old-fashioned.
Well, no. So, getting back to the industry a bit, because there's so much talk about VR's killer app, and you mentioned this in the book. I still expect to be surprised by VR applications, but the apps we pioneered in the 1980s come up again and again. I mean, do you think it's possible we've reached peak app? We got, entertainment, prototyping, training, therapy, and that's kind of going to be VR's applications, period?
Well, that'd be kind of sad. I hope not. I mean, I guess there's no way to really know unless we let this play out for a few more years, Yeah. Every once in a while, I hear about something that I think should be really good, I mean, well, here, let me give you an example of something that one of my students did a couple of years ago that I thought was really pretty remarkable. This is somebody who's studying medicine, not as an MD, but as a PhD. She's now at Cornell, and her name's Andrea Wan. And she did an experiment in see-through mixed reality, like the kind of you'd think of as HoloLens. And she had a bunch of people, well, an unfortunately small sample of people because we didn't have the money to do a proper study or the time. But she had a population with chronic localized pain. So that means people have pain in parts of their body, but not everywhere. And then in a social setting where they could all see each other, and also where there are a bunch of mirrors, they would point to their body where the pain was, and we'd create a persistent, either a tattoo or Band-Aid type thing that would show where the pain was. And then they sort of saw each other's pain visualized. And then over time, in a somewhat sneaky manner that would be worthy of some kind of better version of Facebook, she had these visualizations of the pain gradually dissipate. And then a significant portion of the people experienced their pain dissipating. So it's like a little bit of hypnosis, a little bit of well-applied hypnosis. And that kind of thing, it's not as fun or flashy as some VR apps, but that kind of thing just means a lot when you look at the opioid crisis and how much we need better pain management technologies. So that's the kind of thing that kind of really excites me these days, is when somebody comes up with something that's a fresh approach to an old problem where VR can give you a little bit of an approach that otherwise wouldn't be available. Yeah,
no, that's very fascinating. Well, you wrote this book, I guess, last year, probably the year before that. What's been the most surprising things that's happened to VR since then?
Well, I wrote the book for the most part. Let's see, what's happened. Pokemon Go was interesting. I think it was published after Pokemon Go, but it was written before it, so I might have some acknowledgement of it. But that was kind of an interesting social phenomenon because that was just a lot of people getting excited about something that was just a few steps from geotagging games towards augmented reality, but just those few steps really made a difference for people and really made it more exciting and more broadly appealing, and turned it into a real social phenomenon. That was interesting. And whether it'll be repeated, whether it has legs, is a different question. But that was kind of, I thought that was a cool result. Yeah. Let's see, what else is fun? I've had some fun with, I worked on the user experience for the VR version of Minecraft with kids in the neighborhood, and that was, of course, like practically an insurrection or something. It was like really, I don't know. It was cool to see that. I mean, it wasn't anything really new in the world, I suppose, but it was really joyous. It was something I had a lot of fun with, and it's been kind of we've had the first kind of reasonable ambulatory mixed reality thing out there in the form of HoloLens. And it's been kind of cool to interact with people who are doing things with HoloLens, coming up with things to try. And obviously it's only a first step, but there's a lot, there's a lot out there now. There's some really cool things people pull together. And what I really want, though, I just feel like if we go back even a few years, not too long ago, when people thought about tech, what they thought about was positivity and how the future could be better and the future could be fun and beautiful. And I just feel like in the last few years, when people broadly in the world think about tech, they think about creepy manipulation, and they feel like they've been thrust into a Black Mirror episode, and everybody's fearful and unhappy, and they feel trapped. And it's such a drag, and I really want to get back to the point where people feel like tech is this positive thing. And I think VR could really be a strong part of that, because it's a beautiful thing, at least potentially. So.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just curious, have you played Beat Saber? That's kind of the biggest VR hit at the moment.
I'm embarrassed to say I'm not sure, because I go through and try a bunch of VR stuff, but I have a really busy life, so sometimes it's hard for me to keep track of which things I've seen and which things I haven't.
I'll send the video over. It's kind of a combination of lightsabers meets Dance Dance Revolution, where you're that sounds really familiar. I think I did something like that. Yeah. Which is fascinating. That one I've noticed is bigger than any of the kind of immersive like Skyrim or Minecraft VR games. It's just very kind of easy, very accessible, very fun, easy to play kind of game.
I think it's the interaction that's the core of this stuff, and people still tend to put more funding and attention and team building decisions into the sort of design of an environment and its spatial and visual characteristics, but it's really all about your body doing things and changing the sensory motor loop. That's where the magic is. And it's funny because I feel like we've had a lot of lessons that should teach us that, and yet it seems to take a really long time for the VR dev community to get the message, because people are still funding things based as if they were a movie or a high budget video game, and that's really not where it's at.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you mentioned HoloLens and some Microsoft projects. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your work in Microsoft and what you do with Microsoft Research.
Well, it's kind. I have a diverse and sprawling scientific career aside from the rest of my career. So I do all kinds of stuff. Like I mentioned earlier that I feel the economic model is ultimately the thing that'll make things go good or bad. And so one of the things I've been really interested in is what's an economic model that's sustainable? Like if we were to move away from what's called the advertising model, which I prefer to call the mass manipulation model, if we were to move to something where the user is the customer and people also get paid for stuff that's valuable over networks, how would that work exactly? What would the economics of that be? How can we model it mathematically and figure out where the solution space is and what kinds of problems it might have? And I've been that's something I've been really active on. We've published a little bit on it, but there'll be more soon. I just think that that's crucial. That's ultimately what underlies how things play out. And then once we finally got the dev edition of HoloLens out the door, I kind of focused a little bit more on apps like the one I mentioned on pain management. And I've been a little less in the loop because at this point, it's just like making everything better. We've got the basic thing going. And there's a lot of people really devoted to that project of making it all better. But let's see, what have I been interested in? I'm really interested in certain interaction and visualization problems that I don't think have ever really been solved yet. For instance, one of the things I'm really into right now is an experience to help make the way machine learning actually works accessible to people, so it's not a black box anymore. And that involves things like visualizing or making a haptic sort of visual way of interacting with tensor calculations and whatnot. And I've had a lot of pretty cool experiences with that. I think that's also a really important thing for the world right now. And let's see what else. Oh, all kinds of other stuff. Some of it I'm not going to tell you because part of the fun, with the tech companies is surprising people. So
Exactly.
some of it's not announced and all that, as you might expect. But
yeah,
it's the Microsoft scene is it's pretty cool. It's actually I think I might be wrong, but I think we have the largest VR R&D group in the world right now. I'm not quite sure how big the Oculus one is, but I think,
right.
it's because some of the stuff's really damn hard to do. Like HoloLens, I don't know. I think people don't appreciate just how unlikely it was that piece of hardware would even work, especially in the year it did.
Yeah.
So,
Very good. And we're going to go over to audience questions pretty soon. And if you have questions for Jaron, just IM them to the avatar called Shorny, who's right over there, and I'll be relaying some of the best questions to Jaron. Or you can tweet them at Sinewave Space on Twitter. A little bit more, I was thinking about headset sales, because there's been so much media coverage of VR, and for whatever reason, we're not seeing VR sales make a hockey stick growth. And why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I'm not sure I can add to what a lot of people have already said about it. I just have to say one thing that I think is almost too obvious to be said, but the obvious thing is that it's actually pretty hard to get this stuff to work. Like, if what you have to do is start a phone app and put it in a headset and it's just 3 degrees of freedom, a lot of people have been able to do that. As soon as you're dealing with more than that, like you have to plug cables into your PC and get your controllers paired and download the right thing. And I don't know, I just think it's a pretty rarefied group of people who are able to just do it. Honestly, I think it's pretty challenging. And there's almost like, and the other thing, especially if you want to have like systems from multiple vendors. One thing I noticed the other day, I actually wrote a little piece about this. I don't know if I'm going to publish it, but like, let's say right now you get somebody's headset. It could be a Vive or Windows Mixed Reality or whatever. And so you get it working. And then one of the first things is that whoever sold it really wants you to sign into their hub, so you'll buy more content from them, right? But then you might also sign into other hubs. Like for a lot of people, if you want to get their content, they have like a sub hub that they want you to sign into, right? And so you might end up with a stack of hubs where you're like, you have Vive, Steam, you might have some Windows thing, or you might have something from somebody who themselves has their own range of content. I won't mention anybody, but there are a lot of people trying to do little mini hubs of their own. And so if you have like a stack of these 4 things, then you're using your controllers, and there's like some way to hit the ejector button to get to any one of those. The chances of you going out to one of those hubs starts going up to the point where you're just constantly bouncing hubs. And I've seen that problem for people, and like it's kind of funny. But it's like that kind of thing is still a real problem for a lot of people who aren't techies, So I think and then another, I think, thing that's been said a lot that's kind of obvious is just that tech companies have not had great success in defining wearables for the face that people like and are widely adopted of any kind, whether it's Google Glass or the spectacles from Snap or any of the different headsets. And I've thought about this a little bit, and my opinion is maybe we're going in the wrong direction. Like, I think what a lot of people think is if you just make them look more and more like regular glasses, that at some point people will accept them. But I actually think that's not true. I think that that might just make them feel sort of deceptive and sneaky and creepy in some way. And what I'd rather do is go in the other direction. And you'll see I haven't had any success selling my comrades at Microsoft on this idea. But I'd like to make them like really flamboyant. Like where
Right.
there's a multi-view display where if somebody looks at you and you're wearing this thing, they see your face as the avatar from whatever direction. So it becomes like this living mask for you. And
Oh,
it's like
that's
really, it looks like some amazing, like samurai crazy thing that you're proud of, that instead of being as small as possible is, and like sell fancy ones, like have artisans make great ones and just like love it, like say,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm wearing this damn thing on my head and it's like this big thing and I'm proud that it's big and I have the most, like, I really think that that's what we need to do for a while. Now, I might be totally wrong, and I'm a little weird and maybe my intuitions are not a good indicator of what would work for normal people, but
Yeah.
I just feel like this attempt to hide it is silly. I mean, let's just
Yeah.
admit what we got here. It's just
Exactly. I think about that when people say, well, we're going to get these down to the size of eyeglasses. And I'm like, but I wear glasses and I don't like wearing glasses. Why would I want, VR on glasses that I don't really already want to wear?
Yeah, and so then some of the same people will say, "Oh, well, why don't we make them into contact lenses?" And yeah, we've done some projects for that. No, I mean, the thing is, I think ultimately, what matters the most is the emotion. And if the idea is that somebody is trying to look like they don't have some kind of wearable on their head when they in fact do, at some point that just becomes deceptive and creepy. And the
Right.
creepiness factor has basically been what's undone. The attempts to make widely used wearables on the face so far. So, the face is where you go for trust and stuff. But on the other hand, I mean, there are wonderful historical examples of tremendous things on the head that people liked. And, there were some samurai helmets that actually had little proto mixed reality things on the inside where they'd impose some images on the outside world because the person's getting in they have to get into the headspace of going out and battling, and the device would help them with the self mythology. And I mean, very crude, very early, but the thing is, I just think we should go extravagant, go grand. I'm sick of trying to hide it.
Yeah.
Like, we should be proud. Yeah, man, I have something big on my head and it's great.
That makes sense to me. Yeah. Well, some audience questions. Here's someone.
Sure.
Meta Basalt asks, "What is the future of VR in education, other than beyond Google Cardboard and other light applications?"
Well, so there are a lot of things that I'm really interested in there, and I don't want to claim to know the answer, but you remember how I was saying before that playing with the sensory motor loop and playing with weird avatars and playing with interactivity is where it's at. I think that's especially true for education. If you want to teach kids trigonometry, don't put them in a world where there's a bunch of triangles sitting around in a room. Make them into the triangle, and then their body should change the triangle and interact in some way with other things that reflect the nature of that triangle. Like their body, if their body can turn the triangle into an equilateral one, then suddenly they can make an icosahedron or something where they couldn't before, or whatever it is. Like, give them an experience that amplifies what they can do with their body. And I've done some work with that very thing with a geometry example and having kids turn into DNA and whatnot. And it's been off and on little things I've tried. I'm going to try to get into that some more. The main issue, honestly, when you get into this is kind of a class issue, because like you're doing this stuff to try to teach math, and then you look out at the real world, and the truth is any situation in which kids could conceivably afford this thing already has great math teachers and a curriculum and a lot of high pressure parents, and they're learning their math. And then out there in the world, there's just like a vast number of kids who are undereducated and don't have those advantages. Then you start to think, wow, am I actually applying myself in the way that the world needs? So that's a cycle I get into over and over again.
Mm-hmm. See, Jim Chilla asks about your thoughts on the standalone headsets that we're starting to see vis-a-vis mass consumer adoption.
Right. Well, I mean, I think standalone headset is is the way to go. It's obviously just easier to use. And the first one was HoloLens, not to toot our own horn, but
Right.
I'm very pro standalone. I haven't had a chance to try the one coming out from Oculus. It's actually, that's funny. I ordered one a while ago. Maybe it's around here somewhere and I haven't opened it. I'm not sure. But I have the Vive one, what's it called?
Spacing on the name.
I don't
It's the
remember.
Focus.
The Focus, yeah.
Okay.
And I want to. I think it needs a bit more work. It put a gouge in my nose. I think it has some ergonomic issues. And the thing, can I rant about something?
Please.
This idea that the new standard is going to be you have a headset and then you have a 3 degree of freedom controller that's just a little thing with a button and IMU is so sucky. Like, it's all about your body and being an avatar. And that concept of a standard completely bypasses everything that's wonderful. And so if these sensors if you have a headset that has an inside-out sensor to do its tracking, like, how much more work is it to do a bit of hand tracking so you could at least bring your hands into it? And the answer is, if you just put some effort into it, you can get there too, for God's sake. So I just feel really unhappy with these stupid little 3D and I'm not saying we don't do it too, it's just this thing that people are doing, but I think it's really short-sighted or short-felt, I guess is what I should say. I think it's a mistake.
Mm-hmm. One thing I really liked was your advice to designers and artists working in VR, and I think we have some designers in the house and would love you to impart some of your wisdom to them about creating new VR apps.
Oh, well, I have to confess, I don't totally remember what I said in the book, but there are a few different things I think I can remember. One of them is remember the experience for the person who's using your thing starts from before they've even touched the technology. Like, they walk in a room somewhere and there's a headset. They have to put the headset on. Somebody's either helping them or not. And then they go into this thing, then they have to take it off. And there might be other people there in the room. And their experience is going to be that whole cycle from when they first encounter it and decide to do it, and also whatever interactions they have with the other people who might or might not have headsets. And you have to think about that whole experience loop. What's going on with the other people? What are they doing? You can't just think about the VR thing by itself, because that is missing out on where the person's experience is really going to be centered. And so I think, like, the key questions are what's going through that person's head in the minute before they put on a headset or whatever device they're using. What's going on with their friends who don't have a headset? How are they interacting? What is the experience? What will they talk about afterwards? You have to think about the big picture because from the person's point of view, they're just having an experience. They don't really care which part of it you made. So that's one piece of advice. Another piece of advice is this thing happened a while ago where somebody at the lab did a test and they came to the conclusion that VR inherently is biased towards males instead of females, or at least in their population, on the theory that males are better at navigating or whatever the hell it is. And so I said, well, wait a second. Look at the diversity of the group who developed the thing you're using as the test case. And sure enough, there were no females in that group. And if you repeat the test in a case where there are females, all of a sudden you get a different result. So I think this, I know this is a cliche these days and you might be sick of hearing about it, but diversity in the dev team results in diversity in user experience, in the range of people who can enjoy what the dev team does. And so it's, if you want to reach a lot of people in the world, you should start with a diverse team at every level, because people are diverse out there, and so I feel like that's a bit of a cliche by now, but that doesn't make it any less true. And unfortunately, it's still not followed often enough, even if it is a cliche.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and then I'd say, I've already harped a lot on this issue of using sort of weird avatar mapping and modified modified sensory motor loop and interactivity as the center of the experience instead of the environment design. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with building a beautiful environment. I like a beautiful environment as much as anybody else, but really the name of the game, what distinguishes VR from movies or video games, is this ability to bring your body into it and have a different interactive relationship with the world. And so that's really where you have to focus your effort, or else you miss the magic, And I feel like I'm repeating myself because I said this before, but I'm really surprised how many people don't get that, because they're just, it's like, how many examples do we need before people get the message? But anyway, apparently more. It seems to, I think there's just the two existing cultures where there's a market of movies and video games still have a tendency to exert too much influence.
Okay. Well, question from Rohan on the team related to VR and movement. Do you think having two hands and head moving at once offers an incremental advance in productivity?
Quite possibly. It's always in the details, right? And there's a lot of pretty good productivity just on a regular screen with screen-based interaction, whether multi-touch or some kind of pointer. That stuff's been around for a long time, and people have kind of gotten to the point where there's pretty good productivity on a lot of levels. And yet, I do believe there's some domains where VR would give us benefits that we can't get without it. And so, like, my pet hypothesis now, and I don't know if I'm going to be proven right. I'm not always right. You might be shocked to hear. But my pet hypothesis is that the reason that we have this black box crisis in machine learning is that it's hard to convey what's going on in a machine learning algorithm on a 2D screen. So we've gone through this transition to the point where machine learning algorithms probably have more impact on our lives than traditional declarative programming. That the script that's running a web page, if it's terrible and you can't use the web page, of course, that's a big deal. But as long as it's okay, it's the machine learning in the back end that might have more influence on us. And yet, famously, nobody understands machine learning, and it's kind of this weird folk art where we pay a ton of money to the people who are good at whispering to machine language algorithm and data set whisperers get paid a lot. And I really think we have to break through that. I really think that we should have some way of visualizing machine learning and playing with it that becomes technically correct but still intuitive for people. I think kids should be learning to do it so that it isn't just this black art in a black box. And so I think a VR-based approach to it might be part of solving that. So that's a working hypothesis. Once again, might be wrong, not proven, but that's definitely something that's big on my agenda right now. And so, and the reason I think that could work is that the types of transformations that you go through it's like a sequence of high-dimensional transformations and feedback loops, and I think we can convey that better. Both in a 3D way, but also this idea of mapping your body into the network, I actually think can be useful. But give me some time. Let me see if I can prove it.
That sounds good. Adam, I think you had a question. If you're still on the voice channel.
Yeah, I do. So I've got an interesting one, and this is really why we are so focused on using VR just for simulating what is sort of already possible. I mean, take for instance the region we're in right now. It's not to mock the region, but it's a real world region. It's got it's actually loosely based on a historical zone. But one of the interesting things about VR is that if you take, for instance, a 2D screen, we can visualize 3D on a 2D screen, right? Everyone knows you can do that. With VR, we can start visualizing more interesting things, like even 4D objects and so forth. But I see so little of that come up. I mean, I don't think I have actually seen a VR experience that sort of pushes the boundaries and goes us way beyond what we're normally used to seeing.
Yeah. So I agree with you completely, and I wish we would push that more. I visualize, if you will, me in a meeting where I'm saying, we really need to do a 4D Minecraft, and people looking at me and saying, "Oh, yeah, right." So it's not that easy. I've done a lot of 4D stuff. My daughter, when she was pretty small, got pretty good at manipulating a 4D hypercube, also known as a tesseract, famous from the story. The Wrinkle in Time, and a kid can really develop an intuition for moving around. One thing that's cool, we did this. Do you remember those? I don't know if they're still popular. There were those little robot balls that had an internal roller and would roll around under control from a smartphone.
Yeah, I do remember those.
Spheros or something. So
Yep,
if you take two of those, you put one in each hand, you have all the degrees of freedom for manipulating a hypercube in 4D with haptic feedback. And so you can actually make this incredible controller out of this cheap little, pair of robot balls. And we were doing that for a while. And I kind of wish something like that was out there, because it would be inexpensive and it would be really killer for math education. But anyway, this is like one of the many things that's sort of gone by that there's a real problem in this kind of work that a lot of times there'll be a demo sometimes done by a student intern or somebody finishing their degree or whatever, or maybe it'll be released on some store and then it isn't updated. And so there's this world of these cool little things that are sort of starts, and then we have a hard time integrating them into further things. I think I know what we need to do to fix that problem, which is we need to have some kind of a store where pieces of like that can be recombined and can be used by more people, and there's some kind of a commercial setup for it. We started to approach that a little bit in Second Life a long time ago, and there's some current efforts that have a bit of that quality. But anyway, that's another issue for VR right now, is so many kind of cool little demos or little starts of things that are then kind of forgotten or abandoned. That's a big problem. I wish we could overcome that.
Yeah, it's our big challenge ahead, I think. Right, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to see more of those kinds of things, because I think it's really sort of where we begin to push the boundaries and make what's impossible visualized in front of you.
Or as you. I mean, it should be your body.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, don't say in front of you, because that's the environment. Focus on your own body, because remember, if you look at, I like to think of the brain as like this planet with undiscovered continents, and the biggest undiscovered continent is the motor cortex, or the homunculus. There's this giant piece of the cortex, so it should be you. Like you should become the thing you're studying as a start, and then of course the environment's fine too. But don't if you say it's in front of you, you're already missing the sort of magic of VR.
It's subtle, isn't it? It's that sort of God knows how many years of existing in 3D, and then breaking that habit is going to take another lifetime.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I had a chance to spend time with the great physicist Richard Feynman, and the very first thing he showed me was how to use your hands to think about math, to think about it haptically. And I really think like the difference between the screen and VR is not so much that the screen's in front of you and VR is around you, but rather the screen's in front of you and VR is you. Like that's the cultural transition we need to make.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I think that the next couple of years are going to be quite interesting, especially as with hardware and things get better. Like I've spent more hours in VR in the last couple of months than I think many other people on this planet, and there's still kinks that need to be worked out with the interface.
Yeah,
but we're getting
no shit.
Hey, Jared, you mentioned Second Life, and actually there's a long-time developer who got her start, 3D developer who got her start, and she just asked, what's a good way for someone coming from that space, a virtual world space, to get into VR, straight up VR development? What would you recommend? Nebulosis asked that.
mean, I got to say, like, just do it. It's like when somebody says, well, how do I get into writing? It's like, write, like... If you like the Second Life approach to things, there's still around and they're going through their next rev, or Philip Rosedale High Fidelity thing, or there's you guys,
Right.
like just go find somebody who's doing this stuff and do it, like work on it, find a way to actually work on it. I think that's the only, the way to do it is to do it. Like you just have to dive in. It's not like anybody knows what they're doing yet. With all respect.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many different ways of doing things. No one's worked out a control scheme. No one's even worked out what a controller looks like yet. To my repeated annoyance, but that's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing in terms of advice to somebody who wants to get into any of this is practice patience.
Yeah. It's a fascinating, fast-moving industry, and there's so much in the last couple of months. It's going to be, I mean, God knows the amount of funding and things that went into VR a couple of years back. We aren't even beginning to see the results of that.
Yeah, that actually concerns me because we currently have Amazon got themselves a little kinked up, so I'm not sure where their VR thing is now. They do have a pretty big team, but we have at least 4 of the big tech companies with massive spends on VR. Apple has a huge thing, Google has a huge thing, Facebook has a huge thing, and Microsoft has a huge thing. And so that's a lot, and we're pretty backlash. So that's within the companies. There's a bit of an AI versus VR funding thing that was. But at some point, we have to start delivering some positive results on whatever level for these various companies. So I think the companies have all gotten good symbolic results. I think there's no question that Apple bringing out their AR kit helped them sell iPhone 10. I think Google bringing out their various things helps them position themselves as a interesting company and all that. And I think Facebook doing Oculus has helped them in the same way. And I think Microsoft's gotten that kind of assistance. But, you can only push the symbolic benefits so far. Like we need to turn this into something that has benefits on more levels. So, I think we still have it. I don't think it's a crisis yet, but, we're all on notice. We have to get this thing, to work better.
Absolutely. And I think with that inspirational note, we should wrap it up. And thank you very much, Jaron, for being an inspiration for all this time and for spending so much time with us.
And thanks for your patience waiting for this thing to come together.
Definitely.
This is a great, So, all right, super cool. Well, good luck, everybody.
Thanks very much, Jaron. Hope to talk to you soon.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you, everyone, for coming.
See you. Thank you, everyone who showed up. It's been fantastic having you all here.
I think there's a party afterward.
Yes, I think there is. Yes. If everyone pays attention to just chat, I think all the details will be posted there, if they aren't already.
Dance party. I think there's a teleport and then lots of
and for those who missed any of this or have friends who want to watch it, we will be posting a cleaned up version onto YouTube shortly, although I think the YouTube archive of the current stream should probably be sitting there for a little while until we get the nice cleaned version up for you guys to look at.
Very good. Let's go party.
Yes.